that today President Trump has is to do some limited strikes on Iran, and that is what he is doing. But the point to remember here is that limited strikes do not create deterrence against an enemy which is determined, which is fighting a war of survival, which is fighting and has the existential threat.
Well, today is
So,
the 30th of July, the end of the month that has seen a dramatic escalation, that has seen opportunity present itself as hope of thoughts, and then very soon thereafter we have seen that that hope was not tethered to something very stable. We have with us a guest who is a founding member of our channel, invited by all of us to provide his very unique perspective based upon acute observation in the region. His name is Pravin Sawhney, and I'm been looking forward all day to hear from him. And I'm sure you will enjoy very much what he has to say about this very, very significant ups and downs and the changing dynamics of this region. So, welcome, Praveen. You are now addressing a global audience that is eager to hear you.
thank you, Zulfikar, so much for having me on your show. So, let me start by giving a broad perspective. And the perspective is that the war in West Asia now it has entered the sixth month. So it is about time that we understand all the key players in this war. What exactly is their top priority? What is the top priority of President Trump, of Iran, of Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu? Where do the Pakistanis fit in, and the GCC countries? And that is what I'll be doing. I'll give you a broad perspective on the sixth as we enter the sixth month. Now, first, a bit of a background, and the background is that the world today is multipolar. So, there are three great powers in the world today, which is America, China, and Russia, and two great powers, China and Russia, they fully support Iran. Now, the second thing that needs to be kept in mind is that this war is hugely unpopular in America. I was going through a recent poll, a Pew, I think it's a Pew poll, where it says that some 67 to 68% of the people they do not want this war to continue. You are there in America, you know very well the reports that we are getting. There are shortages or the prices have gone up of oil, of gas, inflation is running high. And also recall that President Trump, sometimes back, he had himself said that he would not like to be another Herbert Hoover. So, the president under which the deep depression happened, and therefore, this is one of his concerns. And another big concern of his is he does not want to be seen as a loser. Once we understand all that, now let's see what exactly is his priority. So, my assessment is that his big priority is to save the petrodollar. And to save the petrodollar, his priority is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz should be toll free, and the Strait of Hormuz should be what it was before the war started on February 28th. So this is his priority, and it is because of this that recently there were reports that the Americans have sanctioned the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, the authority that was created recently by Iran and Oman, that has been sanctioned, and two other insurance companies which are linked with the Iranians, they also have been sanctioned. So once we understand his priority, which is petrodollars, and I have explained this petrodollars, so I won't go in the details explaining here, except to say that the entire American empire rests on the petrodollars. If the petrodollars are not there, and given the national debt, which is $39 trillion of America, it will be very difficult for America to maintain or stabilize its economy, and that will have a huge impact on its military power as well. So petrodollar is absolutely significant. Once we understand this, Then the second natural thing is, logical thing is, that he wants the Strait of Hormuz open, and alongside, this is important, for all the threats that he has been issuing from time to time, and once again he has issued the threats that he'll bomb Iran like never before. He has used invectives implying that he will bomb Iran's energy infrastructure, critical infrastructure, knowing pretty well that Iran will do tit for tat. And once that tit for tat happens, the whole world knows what will happen of the GCC countries and their energy and their critical infrastructure, their facilities. And we know, as far as the GCC countries are concerned, except for oil and gas, they hardly have anything. They don't have water. They use the desalination plants. The food comes from outside. The demography is mostly, a lot of foreigners are there, and they are mostly unpopular regimes in all the GCC countries. So the point I'm making is that there is no way that he will do that. For example, he has recently hit Iran. Reports have come at 6, 7 cities of Iran has been hit, but he will always make sure that he does not hit their key energy and critical infrastructure, because that will have a straight impact on the petrodollar, something that he would not want to do. Alongside, there are also reports that in the briefings that they have been given to President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance and the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff General Kane also have apprised the Commander in Chief of the limited interceptors which are there with the US militaries. Now, all these interceptors, everybody is aware of things like Patriot, THAAD, then SM-6, Standard Missile 6. They take a very long time to fill up the inventories or to fill up all the deficiency. They will not happen in a hurry. So the only option that today President Trump has is to do some limited strikes on Iran, and that is what he is doing. But the point to remember here is that limited strikes do not create deterrence against an enemy which is determined, which is fighting a war of survival, which is fighting and has the existential threat. So, President Trump is in a very difficult situation. This is about him. Now, I come to Iran. What is Iran's priority? In my assessment, Iran's top priority is to get the American forces out of the region. That is his priority. Something that has also been listed in Article 4 of the Islamabad MOU, that clearly says that in this MOU, 30 days beyond the signing of the final deal, which is a total of 90 days, the Americans will start pulling their troops from proximity of Iran. My interpretation is from the GCC countries. Now, because this is the priority of Iran, it is absolutely important for Iran to have full control over the Strait of Hormuz. And because of that, it has rejected the proposal that was recently made by the Omanis. Now, we are aware of the Omani proposal. They were in talks with the GCC countries, they were in talks with America, and they came up with a proposal, which is being now called 50-50. That we know that in the Strait of Hormuz there are two routes. One is the Iranian routes that goes along the Iranian coastline, and the other is the Omani route. So what they are saying, the Omani proposal says, is that it should be 50-50. The commercial vessels should be allowed to make use of both the routes. Alongside, what they are saying is that if there is any toll or fee to be charged, it should be voluntary. Iran has rejected this. What Iran is saying is that all the inbound traffic, commercial ships, they have to pass through the Iranian channel. Whereas the outbound commercial vessels, they can go through both the channels, from the Iranian channel as well as the Omani channel. In other words, there is no way that Iran will loosen its hold over the Strait of Hormuz, because that is the only thing which will compel the American forces out of the region. Now, not only that, uh, we know that the Saudis also, they have created problems for themselves. And not to go in the details, except to say, because your viewers are well aware what the problems they have created, we know that the war between the Yemenis and the Saudis has been going on for the last 12 years. And the Saudis have put restrictions on the use of the Yemeni ports, the use of the airports. And because of that, when the funeral happened of the supreme leader of Iran, and Iranians, they sent the commercial plane to get the Yemeni delegation for the funeral. On the way back, we know what the Saudis did was they bombed the Sana'a International Airport, because as far as they are concerned, this is under sanctions. And the Yemenis have taken immediately two action because of the stupidity of the Saudis. What they have done is, we are aware that they have closed the Bab al Mandeb, the Red Sea route for the Saudi ships. And along with that, they have hit the Saudi Aramco oil facilities. This is a very important facility. In fact, just a side thing for your viewers, Aramco basically stands for Arabian American Oil Company. Now, this is something, when the oil came in the 1930s, then it was the company in California where you are based. So they did a tie up with the Saudis, and then we later know in 1974 how the petrodollar deal was coming. So today, Aramco is completely under the Saudis, but this is where it gets the name. So that has been hit by the Yemenis. And then what the Saudis have done, in my assessment, another mistake is that they have actually broadened the war. Why? Because recently there were reports that the American forces and the Saudis, they hit the Iraqi provinces, they hit the popular military force. Now, popular military force is not a militia per se. Popular military force, everybody is aware, they are those forces which are directly under the Iraqi prime minister. So they are, in a way, the state forces. Some 20 have been killed, the uh, popular military front forces, and some 33 odd have been injured. This is what the report says. As a consequence of that, the Iranians have hit Jordan. They have hit Jordan some 4 or 5 missiles, though of course the Central Command says that all those missiles, they were intercepted. And not only that, there are also report of a drone hit that has happened on the American LNG ship tanker, which was off the coast of Egypt. So the point that I am making is that the Saudis have foolishly broadened the war. Iranians have no problem with that at all, because, as far as the Iranians are concerned, their aim is to get the Americans out of the theater, out of West Asia. And how they are succeeding is that in Jordan, when the missiles were fired by the Iranians, interception is one part, what the Central Command is claiming. The other part is that there are reports that civilian senior people, some judges, some civil servants of Jordan, they have written a letter to the regime in Jordan saying that, look, the American forces on our soil, they are a big vulnerability, they should not be there. So this works to Iran's advantage. So as far as Iran is concerned, Iran is very clear, it's very happy, but the Saudis are panicking. And now the Saudi defense minister, the reports say, he went to Washington. He first met up with Vice President J.D. Vance, and he has also met up with President Trump. And he has told President Trump that there is a need for de escalation. Escalation should not happen. So this is as far as the Iranians are concerned. Iranians are certainly in the driver's seat. They are on top of the game. As I have said earlier, also, these are the people who have the military options. And whereas President Trump simply does not have military options, and I have explained all the dilemma that President Trump faces. Let's go to Israel. Now, recently, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, he was in White House and he met up with President Trump. He said it was a very good meeting that he has had with the president. But what is his objective? What is his priority is the question that he has himself spelled out. Even before he left for America, he spelled it out in Israel itself by saying that the war will end only if the Iranian regime collapses, which it won't, or it abandons nuclear weapon. So nuclear weapon is a priority right now, not for President Trump, but for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Because nuclear weapons is what comes, or the program, nuclear program, the enrichment program of the Iranians, and the possibility that they can make it. Of course, they have the technology, they have the expertise. If they can enrich till 60%, surely they can enrich 90% as well. So, this is worrying him, Netanyahu, because it comes directly in the way of his dream, the Zionist dream of having greater Israel. And this is the reason that we saw recently in the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act of 2027, which in simple words is the defense budget for the Pentagon. Not only has Pete Hegseth asked for $1.15 trillion, dollars, a lot of money, and obviously a lot of this money is being expended, will continue to be expended in the war in West Asia. In fact, when he was giving a separate briefing, Pete Hegseth said that until now only $37.5 billion have been spent on the war, but credible independent analysts, they have put the figure as close to $100 billion already. So the point to make is that they have asked for a huge budget to see basically how soon they can get the interceptors, which of course will not be easy. Along with that, there is a clause in this act, and that clause talks about merger of IDF and the US military in West Asia. What this means is it has not been cleared, it has been cleared by the House, not by the Senate, which itself is a reflection that the Israel lobby has a very strong hold in DC. And what this means basically, the merger is that US Central Command, which though is cooperating with the Israelis in the war in West Asia, but formally it is under the orders of the commander in chief, who is President Trump. If this merger happens, then the commander in chief for US military, essentially the US Central Command, their intelligence agencies, it, the Israeli Prime Minister becomes that. So we can well understand what is which way the US is going. Now I come to Pakistan. Pakistan is an extremely important player in West Asia today, and there are four reasons for that. The first reason is Pakistan has been given the task for collective security. As I have said, I think on your program also earlier, that on 17th of June, when the Islamabad MOU was signed, and the Iranians called it the Islamabad MOU, and there, in addition to the two presidents who signed on the MOU, which is President Trump and President Pezeshkian, Prime Minister of Pakistan Shehbaz Sharif was he signed as the mediator. And on the 17th of June, this was signed, and on the 23rd of June, President Pezeshkian, with a lot of advisors, he traveled to Pakistan. And this was his second travel. The earlier one was in August 2025, and I have no doubts one of the key things which has not been reported but he would have discussed with the Pakistani leadership is the need about the regional framework and what that regional framework will be. Now, regional framework is a term which was said by the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in March of 2026 after his visit to Moscow, where he had 1.5 hours meeting with President Putin. Thereafter, he traveled to Beijing. He met up with his counterpart Wang Yi, and when he came back for the first time in Tehran, Arakchi spoke about a new post war regional framework. And one of the key elements of that would be to have an Islamic framework replace the US framework once the American forces leave West Asia, which someday, of course, they will, sooner than later. Now, what this means is because a lot of people are saying that look, last year in September, I think it was August or September, that the Pakistanis and the Saudis formally signed a defense agreement. So what they are saying is that look, Pakistan now should come in support of Saudis and fight with the Iranians or the Iranian allies. Nothing of that sort will happen. Why? Because we are not talking about collective defense, which is a zero sum game. We are talking about collective security, which is an entirely different thing, which is one of the key elements of the New World Order. What collective security, in a simple term, means is that all the Islamic countries will work together, strengthen themselves against outside interference. And outside interference here obviously means the Americans. So, collective security was signed. We know the Pakistanis signed that with the Saudis last year, and now the Kuwaitis have ratified. We know the defense agreement that they had signed with the Pakistanis in 2023, and following that, the Kuwaiti foreign minister he visited Pakistan. He was there for many days. He met up with all the senior civilian leadership. In my understanding, he would have also gone to the GHQ and met up with Field Marshal Asim Munir. And he wants to be part of this collective security, and I have no doubts that the Qataris also will very soon be looking at that. So, except for UAE, in my understanding, all the GCC countries sooner or later they will want to be with inside the collective security where a major role will be played by the Pakistanis for the simple reason I have said this earlier on your show. Pakistan is a unique country, a Muslim country with nuclear weapons, a country which has no diplomatic ties with Israel, a country which has good relations with all the 57 OIC countries, and a country which has credible conventional capabilities, a country, only country in the world which has good ties with all the three great powers, America, China, and Russia. So, this is one part of Pakistan. The second part of Pakistan, what it is playing is that within the region, it is strengthening the all the Islamic countries so that they all can also come under the rubric of collective security. And all this that I am talking of is backed by Russia as well as China. So this is where that Quad comes in. Quad is, we know, the loose grouping of four countries, which is Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. Now, this is not a military alliance. This is not about collective defense. It is about collective security. The third thing which the Pakistanis are doing, and this is the extremely important job, not that the other two aren't, that Field Marshal Asim Munir is the only person who, in my assessment, is in direct talks with President Trump. And he has direct access to the supreme leader of Iran. And I won't go in the details about how the letters were. The Iranian interior minister was there with the letter from the supreme leader, and then he took the reply. And then there was a delegation of the Americans that had come and visited Pakistan. So the point to make is Asim Munir has become one person on whose shoulder the much of the peace in West Asia rests. And why I'm making this top statement is because he is the mediator between the two sides which have irreconcilable differences. They will not be bridged anytime soon because, as I have already explained, won't go in that at all. And the fourth is anything that is happening, the Pakistanis or especially Field Marshal Asim Munir, in my assessment, is doing with President Trump what President Trump wants him, that you mediate or you bring the Iranians to the table. Everything is being conveyed to China because China is the supporter, in the big supporter in the New World Order, and have no doubts. Even the Russian ambassador in Islamabad, he would also be totally in the picture. So this is about Pakistan's role. Now I want to make a very important, I want to say a very important thing, and that thing is what is stuck right now is the negotiations. Both the sides, they want to talk, because as far as Iranians are concerned, I have said many times, Iranians are on top of the game, but they give primacy to diplomacy for the simple reason they want the regional framework. For the simple reason it is their geography, they have to live here with the GCC countries. For the simple reason that they will not want much destruction to happen here. So the primacy they are giving to diplomacy, it is not that they are not hitting back. They are hitting back, letting the Americans know who has won the game. Now, so in my understanding, when we look at the Islamabad MOU, Article 13 of the MOU says very clearly that there are four articles: Article 1, Article 4, Article 5, Article 10, and Article 11, rather, five articles. The talks have to happen on this before the final deal engagement happens between Iran and America. And please recall, when the MOU was signed, three groups were created. Uh, for to discuss all these issues of the MOU before the final thing is discussed between the two key players. And the Qataris and the Pakistanis, they were there as mediator in all the three groups. And when you look at these five things, what are they about? The first one is it talks about Article 1, that there should be immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts. And there in the MOU, they have mentioned Lebanon. I would say that the Iranians would go now much more and they would insist something which is not in the MOU, that Yemen also should be included. Iraqi PMF also should be included because they are the allies of Iran. So they will specifically ask for this also in Article 1 because time is on the Iranian side. They are taking a lot of pain, but they are doing something extraordinary for the world. A new world order is being created. The second, if you see the article, which is Article 4, it talks about lifting of the naval blockade, and it talks about alongside the US forces to be away from the proximity of Iran, something that I have already spoken. The third one, which is the Article 5, it talks about safe passage of commercial ships. I have already explained. All this is to happen under the watch of the authority as well as the IRGC Navy. Then it wants once again that the Iranians' oil export, which had begun once the MOU was signed, but they were shut down, they need to restart. That the Iranians should be free to export their oil, their gas, their derivatives. All they should be free to do that. And then they would also insist, which is Article 11, the release of their frozen funds. We know that some initial talks went on between the Iranians and the Qataris also. The Americans were there. It was said some $6 billion of the Iranian funds which are frozen in Qatari banks, they'll be released, but it never happened. So I would say now the Iranians would insist that the frozen funds, which is close to $12 billion, they be released before the talks begin. So, in other words, the Iranians have had enough of it. They do not trust the Americans at all. They have the backing of two world powers. They understand that the Trump is in a very bad situation, and there is no way that they will give any comfort to President Trump. Thank you, Zulfikar, for your patience.
Well, I was paying rapt attention, Praveen, and I must say this categorically. I speak with a lot of very, very informed, extremely competent commentators, but you are among the top, among the very best. And it is a delight, it is a pleasure to hear you, and I'm honored that you are here. And I am convinced that our audience would be having the same kind of opinion that I just expressed, and they have actually expressed that opinion in the comments and the numbers of people who watched your first presence on our channel. I would like to address some of the things that you mentioned. I completely agree with each and every statement that you made, and as our audience knows, we are very honored and privileged to have the access to some information that is privileged, but it comes to us. We are entrusted to bring that to our audience, and I've shared some of that with you. Everything that you have said is totally accurate, factually correct. In fact, there is a very recent report about 300, 400 manpads that Reuters is reporting uh, was seen transiting from China to Iran by way of Pakistan. We've been saying this on our channel because we are aware of it, and both Islamabad and China have said no, no, no. This is not true, but we know it's true. So the relationship between China and Iran and Pakistan and Russia is going to stay very, very, very strong, and it's not going to go. It's only going to get stronger. This is based upon everything that I know. I was involved in the team that erected this petrodollar. Not something I'm proud of. Something that I did in my very young stage of my life, and quickly realized that it was not something that I should be doing. So I stepped away from it. But I'm quite aware of how this was structured. Quite aware of how this was set up, and the United States has been financing all of its wars because it has this petrodollar, and the score now is almost $40 trillion. So, Parveen, this is absolutely the key reason why Trump cannot walk away from it, even if he wants to. Maybe he does. Maybe he's personally tired of this. But the people around him, the forces around him, are not going to let this happen. Iran is not going to let the opposite side of it also, which is to allow this to continue. I mean, I have no doubt that this is the crucial the crucible of this entire conflict. So how do you think? And I'm aware of Asim Munir's role as well. I'm aware of the personal exchanges that took place, the visit that took place by the American delegation to the general headquarters, met with Munir. Then Munir wrote a letter, went directly to the supreme leader, and there was a hope that we discussed on this channel that perhaps there is going to be some talk. But then, as you can see, it collapsed, and Saudi Arabia, for reasons nobody understands, is now part of this unwinnable war. So, how do you think this resolves itself?
See, this issue, when we talk of resolve, what is being done is attempts are being made to enlarge it. Now we have to understand first this part before I come to resolve. It's slightly longish, if you allow me to say that.
Please
Uh,
go ahead.
so it is not only being enlarged, Within West Asia, there was also an attempt made by Zelensky, President Zelensky of Ukraine, to merge the two theaters, which is the European theater as well as the West Asian theater. And how he did that was that a commercial ship we all know, which was coming from the Russian port to Iran via the Caspian Sea, that was hit by the Iranian drones, by
Oh,
the Ukrainian drones, by the
yes.
Ukrainian drones. So, and immediately the top leadership of Iran, all of them individually, they said that Ukraine will pay a price for that, for this. Now, the point is that as far as Caspian Sea is concerned, Caspian Sea has been peaceful. Why peaceful? It has only been used for the commercial, work, for the simple reason, for trade, for commerce, for the simple reason that when you look around, you see the map. Around the Caspian Sea are what is called the CIS country, Commonwealth of Independent States, the breakaway countries of Russia. So it's a different story. They have their own concept of collective security. So the Ukrainians have tried to get into that. Now, 2 points need to be understood, and this is important to show the maturity of the winning powers. This is important. And then I'll come to answer your question. Now, there are two powers today, Iran and Russia, Iran in West Asia, and Russia in Europe. Both these countries are winning the war. There should be no doubt about it. And for both the countries, the threat is existential. Iran faces an existential threat, and Russia faces an existential threat. So, when there are countries that face existential threat, they never should broaden the war objectives. They should always stay focused on their war objective. This is a very simple thing about warfare. It is always the countries that are losing, for example, Ukraine, for example, the GCC countries in West Asia, they will try and broaden the war. And this is precisely what the Ukrainians tried to do. So we recently had, obviously, the Russians and the Iranians, they would have spoken to themselves, and as a consequence of that, as far as I am concerned, the evidence is that President Putin on 26th of July 2026, he was addressing the Russian Navy Day, where he had a video conference with all the commanders of its fleet, whether it was the Pacific Fleet, Northern, Baltic, Black Sea fleets, and he also got the Caspian Sea flotilla commander. Now, what is there in the Caspian Sea is a flotilla, as I said, because it never had a military threat there. And here Putin made a very interesting remark. President Putin said, and he praised the Iranians' Navy IRGC, what they have done in the Strait of Hormuz, and called it the Mosquito Fleet. And he said that perhaps we also need to consider the Mosquito Fleet for the Caspian Sea flotilla. Now, what we know, the Caspian Sea flotilla of Russia, it has a few large ships, but basically what it has is small, small corvettes are there which can fire their caliber missiles, cruise missiles. I won't go in the details, sufficiently deadly missiles. So, the point that I'm making is that the Russians have made it very clear that they will take charge of the security of the threats coming from the Caspian Sea, the threats which are coming from Ukraine. This is the important point, because the priority for President Trump, and for President Putin, and President Putin pointed out indirectly in his video conference, where he said that what Russia today has is 9 nuclear powered icebreakers. No country in the world has that. In other words, his priority is the Northern Sea route. His priority is to basically create threats for Arctic Ocean. And because the Trump is so much distracted that he will not be able to spend now on his top priority of the national security strategy, which was the Western Hemisphere. And if America is unable to secure the Western Hemisphere, there is no way that America can become the global leader, even a great power, even. So once we get this point, now let me answer how this will end up. So the only way I see this whole thing ending up is that President Trump, at some stage, perhaps there will, first of all, there'll be enough pressure coming from the Israelis and the Israel lobby to continue and widen the war. But he is also under tremendous pressure to end the war. And he also will realize sooner than later that there is no way that he can take away the control of Strait of Hormuz from the Iranians. So the only way for him is to resort to diplomacy. Here, Field Marshal Asim Munir will play a very big role, and I'm sure he's already talking to both the sides. And both the sides there, what is their perspective is being shared by the either by he's the man who's doing all that. So the point is, diplomacy will mean that Americans will have to accept. Americans have a choice. Either they bomb the GCC countries by decades. There is total destruction there. The petrodollars are gone. So the only way to save it is let the petrodollars remain in some way. And how they will remain is that as far as the transit is concerned through the Strait of Hormuz, in my understanding, it may no longer be in American dollars. It could well be in the local currency of each country, something that the regional framework of Iran talks about. But we also need to remember that the GCC countries, countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like UAE, they have invested a lot of money in the artificial intelligence infrastructure of the Americans. Because if you see, for example, Saudis understand and they have a vision which is called 2030. What that means is they know that this oil and gas will not last forever. And therefore, they have to now shift to artificial intelligence and look at increasing productivity. And this is where still, there will be a possibility of trading in dollars. But of course, it will not be to the level of the petrodollars at all. So, this is one option that President Trump has, that he not bomb any of the key critical and energy infrastructure of Iran and accept a certain fee through diplomacy, except that yes, Strait of Hormuz cannot and will not be what it was before as it was before February 28. So the point, Zulfikar, I'm making is very simple. It is not an easy choice for President Trump, and this is where the Field Marshal Asim Munir, with backing of China and Russia, will have to do a lot of heavy lifting, convince the Americans. As far as Iranians are concerned, they have shown all their cards, and rightly so. It is an existential threat for them, and they do not want this threat to resurface after a couple of years. So they want to finish this ever, forever, and therefore they will retain the control of Strait of Hormuz. And in my understanding, it is a matter of years before we will have a regional framework in West Asia.
Well, Praveen, I cannot say enough complimentary words to you because this reaches to the heart of the situation, the heart of the situation, and we have been saying this in transition protocol on our channel uh, regularly, and recently we made an assessment of the forecasts that we made and the reality that got up with us, and we were very pleased to note that almost everything that we said has been borne out by reality. You are correct because of my privileged honor that has been bestowed on me by certain people in Pakistan. I know what Asim Munir is doing, and he is doing a lot of heavy lifting, which is the reason why the Americans met him, and immediately a letter was fired off. In fact, hand carried by Mohsen Naqvi to the supreme leader, and the supreme leader in Iran said, "Yes, we will talk." and then this happened. There is another pressure point that is building, Praveen, and you can see that the pressure point is the economic pressure point, and the pressure point is that the U.S. is running out of the military options. I mean, this is difficult to say, but it's true. They are running out of their smart bombs. They're running out of the smart missiles. They don't have the ability to make them anymore. So, regardless of what Trump may wish to do or is forced to do by the Zionist influence around him, he has no more options left. So, how long do you think this can continue uh, before the pressures finally catch up with him and he comes down to a recognition that Iran has to be in charge of the Strait of Hormuz? That is the only way this ends. No other way.
See, first thing is, Zulfikar, that this war cannot go on as many American experts, they keep giving the example of America's involvement in Vietnam and Afghanistan.
Yes,
It
yes.
cannot be like that for two reasons. Reason number one is the world today is multipolar. America is not the sole power, global power. That's one. And the number two is that Strait of Hormuz is where 20% of the energy it passes, and the energy is needed by the Asian countries the most. And on top of that, if the Yemenis they shut down the Bab al Mandeb for everybody, then there is additional trouble. Something like 12 to 15% of the trade passes through Bab al Mandeb. And then let me even go a little further and say that as far as one option that few people are talking about, some people are talking about, is still there, and what was done also in the 12-day war that happened in 2025, it was to take the ships right till the Cape of Good Hope, and bring it to the Mozambique Channel, because both the states they were closed. This was closed. Bal Mandeb, sorry, was closed. The other was open, Strait of Hormuz. So that is what was happening, and of course, it was taking more time. But that besides, see, also what needs to be understood is that since 2019 and especially recently, Iran has been doing bilateral and trilateral naval exercises in the Gulf of Oman. It has been doing trilateral exercises where it's Iran, Russia, and China. And the latest one was done, I think, in March 2026. Then the bilateral exercise they are doing with Russia. So the point I'm making is Pakistan is also there. So the point I'm making is that if President Trump continues doing this, what he is doing, and if the Iranians at some stage, which I do not think will happen anytime soon, because Iran is playing a very wise game. But if they decide, which it is, that the blockade that the Americans have put, it's an act of war. So all the ships which are there of the Americans in the blockade, they are a big target. There will be a huge vulnerability. And outside forces will not be allowed. By China, China is sitting right there at Djibouti. Because China is repeatedly saying that the war should end. They are insisting on that. But they also acknowledge that this Strait of Hormuz is the internal waterway for international use. It is the internal waterway of Iran and Oman. So the point is very clear that President Trump actually has no option. The global pressure is piling up, and he himself understands that he doesn't want to be a Herbert Hoover. And there is a big problem in America also. I won't even talk about the midterm elections, which has been made as a very big issue by many analysts. I don't know how big it is because I'm not an American. So I'm talking from as a as a as a observer who's watching all this happening in West Asia and how it links with the European theater, with the Western Hemisphere. I'm looking only at the geopolitics and strategy. So President Trump has to decide what to do. He cannot go on with this off and on, off and on. One day he says, "All right, I signed the MOU," and then he says that I start the war again. I mean, 11th, he has the 11th of April, the Islamabad meeting happens. After 21 hours, JD Vance and team walk out. Then 13th, he puts the naval blockade. Then 17th of June, he signs the MOU. And then on the 7th or 8th of July, he again starts the war. I mean, on a MOU, he himself has signed. So the man does not have credibility in the world. And there is no reason why the Iranians will trust him. And there is no reason why the world will not stand with Iran. Evidence itself of how many what countries stand with Iran you can gauge from the funeral of the supreme leader. Some 40 million people turned up. So the point I'm making is, Zulfikar, it is up to this man to decide what he wants to do. What I have said, and I believe that he will not be able to go and actually execute its threats that I will bomb, Iran to extinction. You can't do that because then your petrodollars go. Simple.
He will be bombing his petrodollars. He will be, if he does that, he will be bombing something that he's trying to preserve, which is the
Precisely.
destruction of the source of the petrodollar. Parveen, I've
Precisely.
kept you longer than than I said that I would, but it's been such a fascinating commentary coming from you, and I do not feel at all in any way that I should hold back my unvarnished praise for the depth of your analysis, with which I completely agree. Not only myself, but many of my colleagues who have been invited to share their opinion on this channel, as well as people who I speak with, who are in very responsible positions. So thank you so much for our global audience. This has been an extraordinary session with somebody who has tremendous knowledge, tremendous depth, and brings a very unique point of view that I fully support. So if you like what we do, please hit the subscribe button. If you would like to support what we do, kindly go to our Substack channel, same name, Transition Protocol, become a paid member. We will deliver this to you inside your mailbox. And we will bring this quality of commentary to you from people as noted, as esteemed as Pravin Sawhney, my very dear colleague, every week, and with some people who are appearing almost every day. So thank you very very much. Until next time, we take your leave. Thank you very much for being our very supportive audience, and we appreciate the fact that you support us so much. Arvind, do you want to
Thank
say
you,
anything?
Zulfikar. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks a lot.